Oh, we have performance next week, so like.
You hear the room now?
Treat day, so during Halloween, I have to every 2 days. I have to this time. Oh, we have a bunch of songs.
Spent some time with the undergrads.
How'd it go?
It's my team. It's like this was like
What was happening?
I wonder if Tuesday is just better than Thursdays.
to look for.
And then you ended up chatting afterwards.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you know, usually
I
haven't
asked me.
people.
Oh, wait, look, you
Not.
yeah.
Like talking about this on my team and I still haven't. I already have conversations, but I haven't put everything.
I guess probably like a government initiative to get early childhood literacy.
Oh. Yeah, briefly wanted to go to Central as well. I have to go to.
In like very early childhood, but like I was teaching first about how to read it.
But it's good. Double major. And if you tells you was like your second major. Oh, okay.
I feel like it totally.
It's really good.
Yeah, but I didn't do it. The reason was like I joined the program. It was very schedule. You have to take some every year.
It's like it's the same thing with teaching.
Another year. I feel like it was not.
Oh, I haven't seen the real budget.
Kind of like things.
Right. That's right. I always look at all the data. Yes. Yes. So how would you?
Usually it's November.
This is gonna take.
Oh, what happened yesterday?
Serious.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. I know.
I'm a last day. Oh, I read it all. I hadn't voted it.
It's Wednesday, so,
I remember you were.
Just was-
But anyways, like 5 and 10.
for Monday, yeah.
Outside of that, I don't know.
Oh, I can't.
It's not in the basement, but it is a basement.
Oh, you so you read it.
Are we
I
all
had not.
even?
So I wasn't.
I don't know what it is.
The crazy one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going, so I'm just. Whenever you're ready.
So,
It's very functional. It doesn't need a vision.
It's.
He's gonna grab a soda and then we'll get started.
Oh, the stress. Yeah, I voted against it for reasons we talked about, but I tried.
Really bad?
I felt, I was like, why am I so out? And like, apparently I had my hours.
no, it makes sense.
Yeah, I'll do
At the same.
bio, which is gonna make you. And, sort of like a setting is, and then next event is then.
Future ballot.
That's good. Right. That's really good.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Let me begin by just thanking everyone here, Professor Paul Peterson and his team, who, as you know, helped organize and convene this symposium. My name is Payman Rohanafard. I am an academic visitor here at the Kennedy School and have been fortunate enough to work with Professor Peterson for a number of years. And my background is very similar to Dan's, who I'll introduce in a moment, but I had spent the majority of my career working in school districts. Started as a sixth grade teacher in New York City, eventually worked in the central office in New York in the Weisberg administration, and then became a superintendent in New Jersey in a district called Camden, a city called Camden, for those of you that know Jersey. I now work on the education technology side of the world, and it is really my honor to, again, welcome you all and help host today's conversation with the incredible Dan Weisberg. Here at the Program on Education Policy and Governance. Let me just quickly set the table before I get to introduce Dan. We have, as you know, a series of these symposiums, and next week, just want to go ahead and flag very quickly. We are going to have on November the 5th, Michelle Reed, who is the former superintendent of Washington, D.C., and she's had a fascinating career, and just want to quickly plug that and mention that. Without any further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce our guest speaker here today. So Dan is a former colleague of mine and quite frankly, a personal hero. But without embarrassing him too much, I'm going to read his bio really quickly, and then I'm going to turn it over to him, and he's going to do a presentation. I'll ask some questions, and we're going to open it up to you all to jump in with questions as well. So Dan is the first Deputy Chancellor in New York City, and in that role, he's focused on ensuring that department strategies advance Chancellor Ramos's vision and priorities. The first Deputy Chancellor's Office manages a portfolio that includes post-secondary readiness. You're going to hear about Pathways, which is a big initiative for them, human resources, policy, and enrollment. For over a decade, Dan helped TNTP, I think we got TNTP represented in the room here today, as their leader and one of the premier education nonprofit organizations in the country, and he served as its CEO for 7 years. Prior to TNTP, Dan served as the Chief Executive of Labor Policy and Implementation for the New York City Department of Education, where we worked together in the Bloomberg administration under Chancellor Joe Klein. And in that role, he was responsible for leading the DOE's relationships with its union partners. And that's a topic we're gonna visit today, and sort of how that strategy then differs from the strategy now. And Dan has a Bachelor's of Arts from Columbia College and is a graduate of NYU Law School. Over to you, Dan.
Thank you, Payman, and good afternoon, everybody. Good to see you all. I want to thank Payman for spending time moderating. Thank Professor Peterson for inviting me up here today. It's great to get out of the bubble of running a school system, at least for a couple hours, and come up and talk to a bunch of smart, well-informed people about where we go in education. Payman and I worked, as he said, in the Bloomberg administration. I would say with maybe only a mild amount of hubris that we were at New York City at that time, kind of the epicenter of education reform, education change. The focus, not just in New York City, but I would say in DC with Michelle and Arnie Duncan was the CEO of Chicago Public Schools at the time. The focus of the reform efforts were in two areas. One was around school choice, so providing students and communities with new and different educational choices in the form of charter schools, but also new district schools that led by often new school leaders who got a chance to pick their teams and have a coherent education model. And then teacher quality coming out of a lot of research coming out of this institution and many others. Research that, by the way, over the course of the years since then has only been reinforced by additional studies that the quality of teachers, the effectiveness of teachers was by far and away the most powerful school-based factor in student academic success or not. And without spending too much time rehashing that, both of those reform efforts, not surprisingly, produced pretty massive political and in some cases grassroots blowback, resistance to the change. And so I would say what has happened to Reform 1.0 is it more or less died on the vine. We don't see a lot of efforts specifically in those areas. Charters are not expanding in the same way. Some voucher programs are expanding in red states, but it's fairly limited. Teacher quality is not a focus of policymakers at the state or district level in any major way anymore. And so the question is, now what? And jumping a little bit to the punchline, I'm sure, Payman, you'll ask some questions about this, and I will bounce some of them back to you as well. Were these the wrong focus areas? Have we found out that we were totally mistaken in our assumptions that these would matter quite a bit to the quality of education we provided to our young people and to the outcomes, the educational and life outcomes for students? Is that what it is? Or do we just not know how to navigate the resistance and need to be smarter about how to do that? And what I'm going to talk about is the policy choices and the priorities we have in New York City at this point. And what I'm going to posit today is that we were not mistaken in our assumptions that these things matter, providing additional options to students who didn't have really high quality options, and really focusing on the quality of teachers and the quality of teaching. And I would say even more the quality of the experiences that our kids have during the 990 hours that we get them each school year do matter. That was not mistaken. But having a political pathway and a way to grow support for the change effort is essential. It's not a nice to have, it's a must have for any policy change. So let me get into what we're doing in New York now, and hopefully that will open up some discussion. Where am I looking to see slides? There we go. Okay. Where am I pointing this? Oh, there we go. So the first thing we did, so I went back to the New York City Public Schools in January of 2022. By the way, hard to believe, but that was right in the middle of the Omicron surge. So that was, maybe we'll talk a little bit about crisis management. But one of the first things we focused on, and it seems in some ways like a trivial thing, was what's the mission? I actually don't think that it's trivial. I think part of one of the areas where we miss in education policy is we don't actually talk about the why. Why is it that the kids are going to school every day from 8:30 to 3 o'clock? Like, what is it that they're getting out of this? And there's a lot of assumptions that are made that everybody understands why it is, but we're not clear. We're not clear to our students. Most of our students, when you go into classrooms and ask them the question, why are you here? Well, the fifth period, I have to be in bio, so I'm sitting here, taking down what the teacher is saying. Yeah, but why? Why are you in school? We don't answer that question for students. We don't answer that question for families who are enrolling their children with us. So first thing we did was spend some time, by the way, with community members, working on a mission statement. And we wanted that mission statement. I and Chancellor Banks at the time, we just had a leadership change, so we've gone from Chancellor Banks to Chancellor Melissa Ramos, which I'm excited about. But we wanted to make the mission statement not just a bunch of highfalutin aspirational language. We wanted to actually signal something concrete. So we wanted to say the answer to the why, at least our view of it is, we have a mission to ensure that each student graduates on a pathway to a rewarding career. So we're going to name the fact that economic mobility and economic security is a core part of our mission. Like it is not success for us to make sure that our kid walks across that stage at the end of 12th grade in the cap and the gown and gets that diploma. Yes, that's an important milestone for kids, but if that diploma doesn't mean that young person is on pathway to a rewarding career and long-term economic security, then we have failed at our mission and equipped to be a positive force for change. It's not all about economics, of course. There is a huge aspect of education that is about making sure that our young people become thriving members of our democratic system, thriving members of our community. So what were the strategies that we adopted? So first one was about literacy. And again, I talked about Reform 1.0 and teacher quality. Well, one way to go at teacher quality, which we did under Mayor Bloomberg and Chancellor Klein, was to try to establish pretty rigorous teacher evaluation systems, to vary compensation based on performance, to have real accountability, that if, after 1 or 2 or 3 years, you're really doing a poor job teaching kids, you could lose your job. That's how we wanted it. It was quite controversial, but that's not the only way to try to improve. Again, teacher quality is a means to an end. Teacher quality, the reason you want to increase teacher quality is because you want to improve the experiences that kids are having to make sure that they graduate ready for a rewarding career and long-term economic security and to be a positive force for change. So New York City Reads is an example of what folks in the biz would call an HQIM strategy, high quality instructional materials, basically standardizing high quality curriculum and then providing really intensive professional development and coaching to teachers who are implementing it, coaching from people who know the curriculum. They don't just know the theoretical aspects of literacy, but they really know where kids get stuck, where teachers get stuck in this particular unit, and they can help teachers to implement well. That is a way to raise the floor of teacher quality. Everybody's teaching a high quality curriculum and they're implementing it well because they're getting hours and hours of coaching every week. Then what you are going to do is reduce some of those really poor experiences that kids are having from teachers who are at sea, who don't know what to do. So it is a way to get at that same issue. And more profoundly, one of the issues that we wrote a lot about and advocated a lot about it at TNTP when I was there is about low expectations for kids. This is not a new idea. What we really try to do is put some data around it in a report we did years ago called the Opportunity Myth. And we found in that research is that kids, particularly the kids who are chronically underserved, kids of color, low-income kids, students with disabilities, English language learners, chronically got lower expectations than their peers in the form of less rigorous assignments, less rigorous lessons, less rigorous grading. And that was all coalescing to produce these terrible differential opportunity gaps that we've seen and talked and advocated about for decades. If you have a standardized high quality curriculum that is rigorous, that is standards aligned, that is taught by teachers who are really well trained and prepared, you can begin to address some of those low expectations. You're going to get an easier math problem than you're going to get because I don't think you can handle that math problem. Those are the micro decisions that are toxic for our kids, for the majority of our kids. If everybody's teaching the same curriculum and they're teaching it with fidelity, then you're not getting a less rigorous, an easier math problem than you're getting because everybody's getting the same math problem. And then the challenge, the great intellectual challenge for our teachers is how do we make sure that everybody's prepared to do that math problem, which is a different approach to teaching than what we have seen. So New York City Reads. So again, the goal, we're pretty explicit with our goal. By 2035, we want 100% of our students to be thriving readers by third grade. And how are we going to do that? By 2028, which is going to come up fairly quickly, all of our schools will implement curricula and interventions based on the science of reading and serve as a hub and a resource for a citywide literacy campaign. Again, back to the politics aspect of this. So if we put our heads down in our bubble and we're doing our curriculum strategy, parents don't know about it, elected officials don't know about it, then they won't care about it. And when the next mayor is in office, it will disappear. If it's part of a citywide literacy campaign, which is what we are undertaking, where our libraries, our museums, our faith institutions, our cultural institutions, anybody who touches our young people and tries to help them to succeed is all involved in this campaign. Parents know about it. We are creating thousands of parent ambassadors who are being trained on the same curriculum that our teachers are being trained on. Now we have a chance. Now we have a chance for this policy to survive our administration. A little bit about the vision, what it will look like. Again, this is inclusive. It is not just about the teachers. It's about our we've got 25,000 paraprofessionals. By the way, many of whom are also our parents. So they care quite a bit. Principals, assistant principals, guidance counselors, everybody is involved. The probably apocryphal tale that I tell to the team all the time is when John F. Kennedy was touring NASA and encountered one of the cleaning staff in the hallway who was pushing a broom and said, "Oh, what? I'm the president. What's your job?" And he said, "My job is to put a man on the moon." So that's what we want. Everybody's involved in making sure, and everybody has a role in making sure that our kids are thriving readers. So just to give you guys a sense of the scale, this is the beauty and sometimes the curse of New York City. Everything is enormous. We have 915,000 students, 3K to 12. So we started this, and what in New York City counts as a small pilot. Anywhere else, this would be front page news, right? So 365 schools. We are split up into 32 geographic districts that oversee our K-8, our grades K-8. So 150,000 students were in the first phase of this. And then this year, we added the rest of our elementary schools. So another 479 schools, another 200,000 students. So now we have all of our students, pre-K, 3K to 5, grades 5, who are benefiting from a standardized curriculum taught by a teacher who is receiving 26 hours of coaching during the year and has received intensive professional development on the curriculum before they started teaching it. So how are we doing so far? One thing we find in many districts who undertake this is they adopt a curriculum at the central level, but the teachers put it in a box in the corner or in the closet and never use it. So we did 8,000 classroom visits, again, scale, 8,000 classroom visits to find out, was it being used? And the first bit of good news is it was being used. And that many of our teachers are making substantial shifts in how they teach. Screener data K-2 is showing that we are increasing. That's really important because when do kids really learn how to read? It's K-2 when they're established. Once you get to third grade, you're a little bit behind. So we're seeing some increases there. And really importantly, as Paymon will tell you, principals are a linchpin. That's true in any district, particularly true in New York City. So we are taking away their discretion, a little bit on change management here. Under the old system, you could pick whatever ELA curriculum you wanted, whatever math curriculum you wanted. Nobody really would quibble with that. Or you could pick no curriculum, even worse, and just, everybody is choosing their own adventure. We are now saying that discretion is gone. You must pick one of these three at the district level. Your superintendent must pick one of these three. And so I was quite nervous that when we surveyed our principals, they were going to say, this is terrible. This is being done top down to me. I'm not happy with this. And actually what we saw is their satisfaction with our curriculum policies went up significantly. And I think that is because we are actually making their lives easier by simplifying the academic strategy. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but right now we have all these actors, libraries, museums, after-school providers, employers, all touching kids. Kids are going somewhere on the weekends. They are going somewhere after and before school very often. They're spending time with mom and dad and relatives, all of whom are doing something with them. And if they're little, probably doing something to help them to read or to do schoolwork. It's all disconnected. We have nobody. We have 140,000 employees in New York City public schools. None of them have the job to make sure all these actors are working coherently. So part of what we're proposing is a seamless student experience where the student is learning about in ELA class, learning about endangered species. Science class, they have a lesson that is on similar subject matter. But then if they're being pulled out for intervention because they're behind, they're not being given a totally different dumbed down curriculum. And after school tutoring, that tutor knows what the lesson was that day and is reinforcing it, et cetera, et cetera. And then the family is also being given materials to tutor on that same subject matter, et cetera, et cetera. So a seamless student experience. Just want to show we do have, these are our public goals that we have. And, people, if there's one thing you can guarantee is people who run schools don't like quantifiable goals that they don't have control over. We don't have control over this. We have to produce. So you see, we have real milestones about how we get to that 100%. And we have real strategies about how to go there. So we're not just looking at overall proficiency. We are looking also at the gaps, at the opportunity gaps that affect our Black and Hispanic students. We are not just looking at state test scores, which are another problem probably for another day, but variable and not necessarily reliable. So we're looking at NAEP scores as well, which we have more faith in the rigor and the validity of. And then we're looking at high school as well. And then let me just say a couple of words about a subject Payman knows actually quite a bit about. So I want to, hopefully he'll weigh in. But, we say all the time in speeches where we use flowery language about how our public schools are the engines of economic mobility, right? This is America. If you go to school, no matter how much money your parents have, you go to school and you do your homework and you get good grades, you're going to move up that ladder. You're going to achieve the American dream. And that is, that was true for my family. That was true for me. But if you look at the data, you're going to see a couple of things. One, that's not actually true for most of our kids. So when we looked at this, only about 10% of our students are earning a living wage. Forget about embarking on a rewarding career that leads to economic security, that leads to generational wealth. They're not even earning a living wage within 1 year of entering the workforce. But the other thing that it tells you when you look at this data is we don't capture this data. So here we are. If you ask most people in public education, what's your mission? Well, we're trying to make sure that all of our kids are able to move up the ladder of opportunity, blah, blah, blah. Do you even measure how your kids are doing after they graduate high school? And the answer almost 100% of the time is no. We have no idea how our kids are doing. Are they getting a job? Are they not just going to college? Are they staying in college? Are they graduating from college? We have generally in K-12 almost no data about that. What does that tell you about where we are really focused? What does that tell you about what our real priorities are? So, and then if you look at, college, which in Reform 1.0, and I think rightly so, has been a big focus, a big goal. Let's get all of our kids ready for college and into college. And we did move the needle on that. the reality is, in New York City and elsewhere, most of our kids aren't graduating from college. They're going into college, but they're not coming out with a degree. That's a problem. And then, if, you know, in terms of the guidance we are providing to students, you look at those quotes, they're heartbreaking. Kids all have aspirations. They can, every single one of them can tell you, this is what I want to do. I want to get into healthcare. I want to get into business. I want to get into technology. Here's what I want to do. I want to get into the arts. I have goals. I have aspirations. What are they getting from our schools? Almost nothing in terms of career guidance. Very little. So they're making it up on their own, and that's one of the reasons that they are not graduating. There we go. And so just quickly, you know, in terms of our strategy on this, so how do you turn that all around? We want universally all of our kids who go to high school to get college and career advising, real advising. So you're a student who's interested in getting into a technology career, somebody at the school is talking to you, is giving you real information about the jobs that are out there in technology, about the credentials that you can earn while you're still in high school that will lead to a great entry-level job at the Googles, at the Amazons of the world. There's somebody in your high school who is telling you that. So college and career advising. And coming off of that, and by the way, not when you're a senior, when you're a freshman, when you're a ninth grader, and even ultimately in middle school, right? And while we are giving you that information, we're also giving you opportunities for early college credits, but not random early college. If you're interested in a technology career, we're offering you early college coursework that's going to help you get that job at Google or Amazon. We are making sure that you are financially literate. So there's no way that you're going to ultimately have a smooth pathway to economic security and generational wealth if you don't know about interest and mortgages and how banking works and how you open up a checking account. So all of our students are gonna get that. And very importantly, we're gonna give you work-based learning opportunities. So we are gonna give you the opportunity to get a paid internship at Google in their technology department. So you can actually work for 15 hours a week, making, by the way, 20 bucks an hour. That in and of itself is life-changing for a lot of our kids. But you're going to be able to put that on your resume. You're going to be able to build social capital. You're going to be able to create relationships with people who are already doing what you want to do later on. So think about that being universal across all of our students who go through our schools. And think about being able to look parents in the eye and say, if you enroll your child in New York City public schools, this is what we're guaranteeing you they're going to get. Not just a high school diploma, but all of these benefits that we're talking about in the prior slide. So just some progress in terms of where we are. And this I wanted to pause on for a second. This really brings it home, at least for me. Typical student from Queens, this is what their resume might look like when they get out of high school. If they're trying to get even a part-time job while they're going to college. On the left, okay, I got my diploma. I went through high school. I worked hard. I did all the courses. I got my diploma. I worked part-time in retail during high school. I did that. I got some skills. I think I'm a good kid, and I think I can help you. Versus if you go through our Future Ready program, you have now taken college courses, again, not just random college courses, random marketing courses or so forth. You've taken computing fundamentals, intro to computer science, database concepts and programming. You have worked, you've gotten a paid internship at Google, where we can tell you very specifically, it wasn't just in the file room, doing menial tasks. You were doing real work and building real skills. This, I think, captures what the difference is. The typical traditional high school model is on the left. That's where you get a diploma and that's it. And then good luck to you. I hope everything goes well. On the right is where we want to go in New York City. And what I would posit we should be going generally in public education is to make sure our kids are truly prepared whenever they enter the workforce. They're going to get a good paying job that they find to be rewarding, that leads to a rewarding career. And just to give you a sense of the trajectory, we're going to get to scale very quickly. Spend time on this, and that is it. that is where we are. So pathways as a guarantee, economic security is a guarantee, and these two things are not disconnected. If you haven't learned to read in elementary school, the chance that you're going to have a great experience doing an internship in the tech department of Google are very, very low. You have to be, by the way, not only do you need to be a strong reader to take advantage of those sorts of opportunities in high school, you need to be able to do math. And by the way, you don't just need to be able to do math. You need to know how to work in Excel. You need to know the Microsoft Office suite and how that works, the whole thing. So our kids, the building block is early literacy and early math, but it's towards a very particular strategy and goal. So that to me, and the punchline, Payman, before I turn it back to you is, the UFT, which is very powerful teachers union, New York City,
United Federation of Teachers.
United Federation of Teachers, which, heavily opposed the work we were doing under Mayor Bloomberg, is solidly behind both of these strategies. And it's not because they love me or they love the chancellor or the mayor necessarily. It's because, A, we're not going right at some really tightly held and valued rights that they feel they have. We're not asking them to give it up. It's because if we do this well, it's actually enhancing the careers of their members and making their lives easier. And because they at the leadership level understand that this is a really positive thing for our school system that ultimately will bring support for the school system and for their members. So I think we're on to something, but the jury is still out.
Terrific. Thanks so much, Dan. So New York City Reads and Pathways, and I believe the sort of public branding of Pathways is future ready.
Yes, future ready, yes.
So Dan didn't pick those two initiatives because they're splashy and salient for this group, but they are the two signature initiatives in the city right now. And when I say signature initiatives, these are initiatives that are actually in many ways led and born out of the mayoral administration. And I say that to say, I think it's no secret that there's some political, shall we say, turbulence in New York City right now. And so you've got a mayor who has been indicted, who is leading these initiatives alongside a now former chancellor who brought you in, David Banks, who pretty unexpectedly resigned. So how do you, obviously this is incredibly compelling, but how do you think about sustainability of those initiatives? Because when Dan and I worked together, we felt similarly compelled by our initiatives, and those initiatives for the most part have gone by the wayside. So how do you think about these initiatives?
Yeah, I mean, one of the lessons learned from our work together under Chancellor Klein and Mayor Bloomberg was you ought to be thinking about sustainability from day one. At some point, there's going to be a different administration. And that's what I tell the team now. So yes, there's unpredictability, there's uncertainty politically with Mayor Adams. That's not a good thing for the work we're doing. Certainly, I wouldn't have hoped for that. But there was going to be a primary election this coming June, no matter what. That was coming. Maybe the mayor, is going to get reelected. Maybe the mayor's not going to get reelected. We shouldn't be putting all our eggs in the political basket that we just got to hope and pray that the mayor who supported this work stays in office. If that's your play, you're ultimately not going to succeed, because none of these things can be completed in a few years, in one or even two terms. They have to be part of the permanent landscape, and that's what we're reaching for here. We're reaching for guarantees that we're providing to families that nobody's going to be willing to roll back. So what I say to the team is, yes, this is unexpected. This is another wrinkle, another complication, but we've been thinking about sustainability the whole time anyway. That's why we're doing all this work. For example, creating parent ambassadors around literacy. That's why we're creating literacy hubs in barbershops and restaurants. This is why we're spending so much time investing in building support for this work with stakeholder groups across the city. Keep doing it. Like if we are successful in doing that, if the underlying work is successful and it has momentum, and we're building support among the range of stakeholders. By the way, philanthropy, also critically important in any city, whether it's Boston or New York or DC. If they're all invested in this work, it won't matter who is in Gracie Mansion. Nobody's going to roll it back. And also, these are things that everybody can get behind. David Banks, the chancellor, was enormously strong at telling the story of literacy in a way that everybody was nodding and getting behind. We were giving, and it was not about blaming anybody, certainly not about blaming educators. We were giving teachers the wrong playbook for decades. We need to change that. We need to give our teachers the right proven playbook. People responded to that. The idea that every kid is going to get an opportunity for a paid internship at early college, by the way, early college, big selling point for parents, it's free. It's free. You're getting tuition-free college credit that's going to carry forward when your kid actually goes to college. These are fairly popular things, so shame on us if we can't build some support, but we've got to do that work every day. And however much time we get is however much time we get. At some point, you know, the alarm will ring, but we want to, at that point, be thinking we really did everything possible to make sure there was grassroots support and broad support for this, and that whoever the next mayor is not going to want to roll it back.
I want to pull on a comment you made earlier about the unions buying in, and that's obviously part of the sustainability strategy. And so if it didn't come through during Dan's introduction and my introduction of him, he was, you know, again, in the New York City Department of Ed during a different mayoral administration, spent about 7 years running TNTP, and then made a triumphant return back to New York City. His first time in New York City, we didn't necessarily have the support of teachers' unions, and obviously different mayor, somewhat different set of policies. And now Dan's saying they've got the support of the unions. Again, Dan's job in that prior administration was to work with the unions, and he was a bit of an attack dog, if you don't mind me saying that, like on behalf of our administration.
Fair.
So talk about sort of what has allowed you all to get that buy-in from the teachers' unions, and sort of what's changed, and perhaps maybe has your thinking evolved in the way that we work with unions?
Yeah, I mean, so, you know, a number of things are different. One is that the policy agenda is different. And, you know, an agenda that says we want to evaluate teachers and those who are doing a poor job really should be fired, that's going to get a different reaction. Then we got to make sure that we're teaching kids to read. So part of it is substantive. Part of it,
put it that way.
Yes, I know. Just to put it starkly, part of it is certainly my thinking has evolved, and that is our bet. You know, I would say was largely about Mayor Bloomberg being in office. You know, we didn't necessarily think that much about, well, you know, we have a really tense relationship with the U of T. They're going to be here long after we're gone. So here's the strategy to make sure that they don't kill whatever policies we are putting in place when they get a friendlier mayor. We just thought, well, you know, we hope we get 8 years. Turned out maybe it was, you know, it was even longer than that. It was 12. Yes, that's a story for another day. And we just hoped that it was long enough to. And the other thing, Payman, I would say, I don't know if you would agree with this. We did have a flawed assumption in those years, which was, if we can show results, if we can show that kids are really legitimately doing meaningfully better, then the politics will take care of themselves. I really thought that. I really did. I thought if we could show parents and elected officials and community leaders, look at where our school system was in 2002. Look at where it is now, say in 2011 or 12, and we could show that it was much better. Of course, a number of things, not just test scores, that people wouldn't want to roll that back. That was absolutely 100% completely wrong. Completely wrong. Politically irrelevant. And I can, you know, and Payman can as well, quote you all kinds of data about how much better off, and I really believe this, as somebody who went through New York City public schools as a student, the schools are much better than they were. We're still failing most of our kids. There's no mission accomplished by any stretch, but schools were meaningfully better at the end of the Bloomberg administration across any measure you can think of than they were at the beginning, and it didn't matter at all politically. And so I hope, you know, gray hair, scars, I'm a little, certainly older, hopefully a little bit wiser, And so part of it is, one of the ways we can ensure sustainability is at least make a big attempt to get the UFT, which is the most powerful, stakeholder interest group politically in Albany and in New York City, on board. Let's at least try. And part of that, Payman, was, part of his leadership. I'll just say, we had a very tough relationship with the then president, of the UFT, Randy Weingarten, who's now president of the AFT, and very, very capable, very smart, very knowledgeable. And part of it was certainly, I would say, our fault. But we had a very tough time establishing any sort of trust. And the leadership now, Michael Mulgrew is the president. I would say it has been much easier to establish trust, which is the precondition for being able to get anybody's support. I had to prove to Michael that, I would keep my word, that I would listen, that I would really take their concerns into account, that I would deliver on the promises that I had made. You can't do that if the other party is not really willing to even entertain it. And so, I think probably I'm a bit wiser in how we approach it. The policy agenda is different, but the consciousness that support is really critical if this work is going to continue, I think is an important component as well.
I want to go back to the comment you made about state test scores. So you said we tried to point to results, and the results don't always mean test scores, but for the most part, I think one could argue that that's what we think about, particularly state math and ELA summative assessments for grades 3 through 8, very specifically. And we did a lot of pointing to those results. And you mentioned earlier that those results are, I think, variable and unreliable, words I think I heard from you. And I'm going to sort of take it to a little bit of a provocative place in terms of you can't depend on those outcomes. And it sounds like, again, you're publicly acknowledging that. Does that reflect any sort of evolution in your own thinking? How do you then think about outcomes that you do want to point to? You referenced NAEP, but just curious if you could just expound on that a little bit.
Yeah, and I should clarify the reason why I find the state test scores not to be a totally reliable measure is because they change, and they should change. But every few years the state will change the test, and that makes it very difficult to compare results. So proficiency levels under the new test can't really be compared with proficiency levels under the old version of the test. And the way that states, this is not just New York, this is every state, the way that they calculate proficiency, literally, how many questions does the kid have to get right in order to be considered proficient? That process is not totally transparent. The cut scores, where they set those cut scores, not totally transparent. So even when they don't change the test, you're not totally clear whether what you're seeing is a real change in student learning or just the way they calculate proficiency change. And so one of the hedges against that, we're getting into definite data nerd territory here, so warning on that.
You're a good company here.
Yeah, well, one of the hedges against that is you look at how the city is doing versus the rest of the state, because all kids in the state are taking the same test. And so that is comparable. That's one of the things we looked at. That was an important benchmark for us under Mayor Bloomberg. And what you could see is we were steadily closing the gap with the rest of the state. That's an important hedge. But let me say two other things quickly. NAEP is very helpful because that's a nationally benchmarked exam that we can look at. And the other piece is back to the mission. I don't want to lose that. If our mission is truly to make sure our kids get to economic security, you got to measure that. That's a major undertaking, but we're working on that. Getting Department of Labor data so we can actually see what our kids are earning after they are no longer kids, after they leave us, and track that back to see if this group of kids is doing really well economically by age 25. What were the high school experiences? What were the middle school experiences that they had maybe that produced that caused that outcome? So that's ultimately where I think we need to add an important metric, but that's going to take a lot of doing and some real time.
I'm gonna ask one more question, then we'll open it up. I have some additional questions, but I'm recognizing we're almost at time here. My final question would be around the sort of a little bit reductive, but the dichotomy of reform, and you kind of touched on this in your very top of your comments, but there's the system of great schools approach, which is sort of create new school options and open up choice. And then there's the great school system approach, which is to sort of, in a very centralized manner, improve all schools. And I'm just curious, like, would you say that New York City ascribes to one or the other, given there is a lot of choice already? And you personally, do you have sort of eggs in one basket more than the other?
Yeah, my eggs are probably more in the latter basket. I'll tell you very specifically. I was very compelled by Chancellor Klein's vision, which was the great schools focus, like find great leaders and empower those leaders, and they will figure it out because they're the ones that are closest to the kids and the families. And the thing that I didn't appreciate back then is that there are a bunch of areas that's going to get you improvement, and it did get us significant improvement in New York City. That was right from that to that extent, except our typical principal doesn't know what the right academic strategy is, doesn't know how to make sure that the students who have IEPs, how to make sure that they are reading in a proficient way and they're doing math well, even though they need slightly different supports than other kids. They don't know what the right strategy is. So you can empower them, but if you're empowering people and not giving them the tools to say, this is the playbook that works, then you're going to have a relatively low ceiling. And so we still don't know the answers. I mean, it's not like I have have all the right place for them to run, but I think there's certainly a place for empowerment, and it can't all be top down, but there are certain core things that we have to raise the floor on. And I think academic strategy is definitely one of them. Most of our principals didn't know how to get to academic excellence. Some of them did, but not enough.
Thanks, Dan. Let's open it up. Yes.
Hi, thanks for being here. My name is Ella Hansen. I worked on the DC Council before this, trying to get DCPS to do the same thing. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about your implementation process and which educators you chose to prioritize, if you're working with classroom teachers first or principals, or if you have the capacity to do both at the same time.
Yeah, so really important to do both. I mean, what happens is if you focus, you're implementing a new curriculum and you say, well, the teachers are the ones who are going to be teaching this curriculum. We got to focus on teachers. And the principals, by the way, some of them are not real confident on curriculum and instruction. So let's just kind of leave them out of it. What'll happen is that curriculum implementation is going to get deprioritized at the school level. And so it was really critical for us to make sure that the PD, the professional development we were doing around the curriculum, that the principals, assistant principals, and teachers were getting the same PD as much as possible. Didn't always work, but they were getting it at the same time in the same place. And the fact that some principals weren't that confident about their ability to really understand the finer points of curriculum instruction, that's okay. That's all right. We don't necessarily need you to be the expert, but we need you to understand the scope and sequence. We need you to understand the principles behind the science of reading, for example. I think that's critically important. You really got to hit both those. And by the way, we've got thousands and thousands of coaches whose job it is to go out there and help the teachers to solve all these problems for their students. So they had to be a huge part of this as well. They were all getting retrained. And part of it is we brought in outside experts who we knew the curriculum well, had implemented it in other places. And so that's still happening. That's side-by-side learning from coaches who really are expert in the curriculum is happening right now. And the idea is we're going to gradually release and let our internal people, be the centers of excellence. But you really got to get both, and you can't just do principals either. By the way, some districts make that mistake too. Well, we'll train the principals and then they'll turnkey it. Makes sense, except if the principal is not a curriculum instruction expert, it's going to get lost in translation. So you really have to operate on both levels.
Hi, my name's Anna Sophia. I am honestly really grateful that you're here. That means a lot to me. I was just a public school teacher in Texas before coming to HCAS,
Whereabouts?
San Antonio ISD.
Oh, yeah, yes.
And yeah, and I was also the union rep for campus, so I'm bringing that here to
Yeah,
with what I'm gonna ask. So I think first, well, there's a lot I want to say, but I'm just gonna stick to three things. So in terms of the rigor in the classroom, totally makes sense, totally agree with that. Obviously, New York, very different from Texas. But I'm wondering, you know, with the ratio of class sizes that I saw at least, that rigor, I think that it gets lost because there's just one versus like 32. So I'm wondering if this plan, like, you know, kind of does anything to maybe add support, maybe more paraprofessionals or teaching assistants in the classroom. Also, in terms of the training, which is super necessary, the science of teaching reading is one of the hardest courses I've ever taken. And it's like very informative. But I guess I want to know, when are educators expected to complete that training? Is it like over the summertime? Is it on Saturdays? Because we would have to do a lot of our PD on Saturdays or after school. And then finally, I guess with the curriculum, I think you might have mentioned this, but you know, to what extent were educators contributing to that curriculum from New York public schools?
Yeah. Great questions. And I'll probably forget them as I go through, so you'll remind me. But on your last question, you know, we had a committee system that evaluated different curricula. Teachers were certainly on it, heavily represented. And we do provide choice. So for K-5 ELA districts, so again, we're split up into geographic districts. Superintendents have a choice of 3 curricula. I have to say there's a lot of noise, emphasis on which curricula were on that list and which curricula were. And I understand that's important and really important to get input of practicing teachers. But you know, my view is you could probably pick any one of a dozen curricula, and if you implement it well, meaning teachers are really getting support around it, kids are going to do better. So, you know, our emphasis is not on the selection of the particular curriculum. It's much more on making sure, yes, that it meets some basic quality standards, ed reports green, blah, blah, blah. Teachers seem to find it really accessible, but then we're really going to provide robust support and coaching and PD about the curriculum. So, that was that, you know, and so far the returns, I would say, are fairly positive. Remind me your other two.
When teachers are trained.
Yeah, so when the
When?
training takes place?
So here's, this is really, it's really important that we not say to teachers, you're already working like 80-hour weeks. Okay, you got to put another 10 hours into PD. So a lot of it's job embedded. A lot of it is the coaching is happening during the school day. And, you know, as you're preparing to implement curriculum in the spring, you get a chance to teach a unit from the curriculum that you're adopting, kind of no stakes, just like, you know, get a sense of it. That's been very helpful. We've heard from a lot of teachers that was helpful to get that prep time in the spring with coaching before we have to do it for real in September at the beginning of the school year. But the other thing is, in order to keep your license up, you have to do PD. Right? CTLE, I think, is, you know, it's called in New York. And so I can't remember how many hours, but teachers have to do this PD. And so we work with the union to make sure that the PD is aligned to the curriculum they're using, so it's not extra time. And one thing we've noticed, teachers will come out if they get that CTLE credit. So that's been effective so far. We have not gotten complaints as yet from teachers saying it's too much time, like I'm having to spend my Saturdays doing it, et cetera. So far, so good.
And is there anything like in the plan that kind of factors in for, you know, the rigor, the level of rigor to support teachers inside of the classroom? Like,
yeah, so separately, we'd need a whole other, you know, seminar on this. We've got a class size law in New York that's requiring us to hire thousands of additional teachers. Paraprofessionals, the numbers are spiking, not because of our HQIM program, frankly, because of special education. So more, you know, at this point, 22% of our students have IEPs. And many of those IEPs require additional support of different types in the classroom. And so we have more and more adults in classrooms. It's almost rare that I go into a classroom these days and there's just one adult, certainly one adult for like 30 kids. So that's kind of happening organically. Part of our emphasis this year is providing the same sort of PD systematically for our paraprofessionals, so they can really work.
I will say really quick, you should study the average class size law in the state of New York. It'll blow your mind. It's somewhat like we work with a lot of Texas districts in my organization, and like the average class sizes there are wild.
Yeah, that I'm surprised to hear
So
that
much
they're
higher
using
than any other part of the country.
state law.
Ross.
Dan, thank you for this. A question about incentives. So I have an ed tech question, but I'm going to skip that one.
There's your
Sorry, incentives. We've seen some states around the country try to align incentives by saying if a student is not passing this threshold for literacy in grade 3, we're going to retain them. And it's not just about that retention policy, but it's about all the things that happen that you have to put in place to avoid that retention. And so how have you guys thought about social promotion, putting a line in the sand, aligning incentives in New York and saying it's not just about this curriculum and implementation, but we're not going to proceed here until everyone's literate?
Yeah, it's a great question. Of course, that was an early major controversy under Mayor Bloomberg in New York City. Here's the sequence of how we're thinking about it. Put a high quality core curriculum in place. So, the tier 1, like the core instruction is generally consistent and high quality. Now what we're focused on, we're about to roll out, I don't want to make too much news here, but it's doing the same thing on intervention. Teachers are hit with 6 different or 8 different programs that they're supposed to put in place for kids who are falling behind. Some of those programs are aligned to the curriculum, some of them are not. Some of them have really good research behind them, some of them don't. We have to systematize the program intervention as well. So if a kid comes to us in the 2nd or 3rd grade and is behind, teachers have a playbook they can rely on that we have a pretty good idea is going to be effective with broad swath of kids. So if we get those things in place, if we can sequence it that way, we're not there yet, then I think we have some interesting policy choices about what to do in 3rd grade. So I'd feel a lot better about retaining a kid, which, let's be clear, that's a major impact on the kid and the family. I'd feel much better about if we have to make that choice, if I know that kid is going to be getting really good, core instruction and really good intervention to make sure he or she is going to catch up. Now, maybe that kid got to us in the middle of 3rd grade, just needs more time. Maybe the teacher that he or she got in 2nd and 3rd grade weren't trained on all the interventions. So we have we know that more time is probably going to equal better results. The problem with dumping a kid back in 3rd grade who got poor instruction in 3rd grade is it's not going to help him if he gets poor instruction again and poor content. Maybe he'll get just over the hump to pass the state test, but won't really be prepared for the next level.
Let me keep going this way. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Michelle Cruz. I'm so glad you're here. I love how you're weaving your effort into the fabric of the community. I'm really interested in the parent ambassadors. Was that really tough to recruit them at first, or were they really excited? And how is it going now?
It's so glad you asked about that. It's we didn't know, like, this was new. We had never done this before, and parents are busy. They get a lot going on in their lives. So would they really spend additional time to go and do this training and become an ambassador? And the demand has been tremendous, and the satisfaction from parents who are getting the training and then becoming ambassadors has so far been overwhelmingly positive. So, so right now, every mom or dad is really invested in their kid's education. They want their kid to do well. They want to help. Most of the time, we keep them at arm's length and we don't really provide access to them, particularly, by the way, if English is not their first language or, they didn't have a great experience in school. And we're saying is, none of that matters in terms of your ability to become an ambassador. And so, right now, I got to frankly raise enough money to make sure that that we can make that program scale up all across the city. I think it's critically important. Again, it's not just oh, let's do something let's build support among parents. It's actually making sure that the time that the child is spending with mom or dad reading a book or doing whatever is actually helping that child to zoom ahead academically. And if we can crack that, we've really got something. So far, really, really promising returns on that.
My name is Candace. Just to clarify, I'm by no means an education expert, but I'd imagine, especially in a city with so much income and social disparity, that implementation would have different barriers and hurdles in different school districts. So I wanted to hear a little bit more about that experience and how you provided like additional support to those schools.
Yeah, so here's the beauty of making sure that the curriculum that teachers are using is high quality and they're trained on it well. You don't necessarily need more coaches per teacher in a school that serves students from low-income families versus students from more affluent families. The unit, if you will, is the same. I need some number of hours for that teacher to really learn how to do that core curriculum really well. Now, what's going to be different in that school is you may well have more students with disabilities. You may have more students, and probably will, in temporary housing. You may have more students in foster care. And those students are going to need different supports than students who aren't in those circumstances. And you're going to probably need different strategies to communicate with families in the same way and invest families in that process. But that we're doing anyway. So if you look at kind of our class sizes and our kind of adult to not just teachers, but adult to child ratio in the schools that serve those populations, you're going to see much more favorable ratios. That's not just, by the way, happenstance. One of the things we did last year that I'm very proud of, Emma Vadera was really the quarterback on this, was we are in the kind of core funding formula, we are providing additional funds for schools that are serving concentrations of students with those particular challenges. They're getting more money to hire more staff or to bring in more programs. And that's a big deal. And more money for each student in temporary housing. We have well over 100,000 students in temporary housing, which is a whole nother challenge. It goes beyond education. So we're trying to make sure that schools are getting funded based on the needs of children as much as possible. I think we're ahead of the game. We're not where we want to be, but we have, I would say, a more sensitive funding structure than most places. And so the question is, what are we providing them? What strategies are we providing them on the academic side? And we want to make it universal. So anyways, I don't know if that totally answers your question, but the other thing I will say is, again, if you think about this as raising the quality floor, which kids are going to benefit most quickly? It's the kids who are underserved, who are chronically underserved. And we're starting to see that in the data. The kids who are doing relatively better in the initial years, and the initial years are always going to be rocky. You're not going to see huge increases in test scores right away. But the kids who are showing better results right away are our free and reduced lunch eligible kids, are Black students in particular. And I can't prove this yet, but I think it's because they were suffering from the variability of the quality of instruction. We are beginning to see that floor go up. And so those students are the first ones to benefit, which is obviously a positive thing.
All right, we'll take one last question over here.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation and of course, all the work you've done as well. I was just wondering, since in the beginning you talked about teacher quality and incentives for good teaching, and I was wondering if you could deep dive a little bit more on that and maybe a little bit of context. So I'm from Germany, where the vast majority of teachers are employed by the government, and there's no real incentive to do good teaching, because the way to go into the higher like a salary bracket is just via time, but not you teach particularly good or not good. And the only counter argument that I've been hearing for many years is that if you could create incentives for teachers, for example, that a certain amount of students achieve certain amounts of grades in the final exams, it could infringe on academic integrity. But I was just wondering what your, like, which incentives were effective in the past?
Yeah, it's a great question and a big subject. I will say, I hope this is not true in Germany. It's certainly true here. The base compensation for teachers in a lot of places is just totally inadequate. Totally inadequate. So if you're a teacher in Arizona, I don't know if there's anybody here who's from Arizona, just use that as an example, and you're making $35,000 or $32,000 a year, you're driving an Uber after work. You are working in a grocery store on the weekends, or you're bartending on the weekend just to pay minimal rent. If that's your problem, then incentives is not an immediate challenge. The immediate challenge is you got to be able to pay your teachers a living wage, and we have a problem. What I would say is I'm a big proponent of using incentives to reward our teachers who are doing a great job, because teacher effectiveness is widely variable, and some teachers truly are superstars. Their kids are zooming ahead. We need to retain those teachers, and we need to incentivize them. So I would love to pay them more, particularly, by the way, if they're science teachers, special education teachers, places where we have shortage areas. But if we don't fix the thing that is right in front of us, which is the base compensation in many places is just totally inadequate because of the way we fund our schools, then we're going to be missing the forest for the trees. And so I just want to make sure we're thinking about both of those things together. And again, I hope that's not the case in Germany, that you have teachers who are driving Ubers and working in grocery stores just to pay rent on an apartment they're sharing with, 3 other people. But our colleague from San Antonio probably has lots of those stories, unfortunately.
Several. Yeah. I find it really interesting that my international, my fellow students, my peers, right, that are international, they're very shocked to hear how we fund our public schools, and concerned. And I think that should be a normal reaction. And so, yeah, there are definitely incentives for better teaching. I know in Texas, we have teacher incentive allotment and master teacher initiative. However, those require significantly more hours of PD that are not inside of like paid classroom time, what's in your contract. And also kind of the final mark is the state test, which, kind of going off of what you had said, my students are tested so much that I lost close to, and I wish this were an exaggeration, I lost close to 2 months of instructional time on interim testing, practice testing, and then actual testing from the district and state. And so by the time they take the actual test, they really don't care about it. They're tired of testing, and it continues to change. Also, the proficiency levels, Texas at least, we've dropped ours. So my students taking history, they have like reached grade level by, I think they just need to achieve 61% accuracy on the test. And so that doesn't necessarily mean that they are understanding the content, but that the state recognizes that as they're succeeding and understanding the curriculum, which is kind of optics. So it really is, it's a matter of we're missing the mark, and we need to not beat around the bush about what the actual fundamental problems are with public education in the United States in order to even get to the point where we can incentivize our teachers to do better in the classroom.
Well said. We should add you to the museum.
Yes.
Come
back next week.
Can we give Dan a round of applause? Literally trained in and is like training back to New York City in a couple of hours, maybe less than a couple of hours. So thank you so much for doing this. And I'll just say again, next week, Chancellor Michelle Rhee, who led Washington DC Public Schools, she's actually going to be joined by, I should have mentioned this, George Parker, who was the head of the union in Washington DC when she was chancellor. So it's going to be a really, really interesting
Come for
conversation.
that one. Trust me, it's going to be
We're
entertaining.
taking it on the road.
Yes, yes. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you all very much for being here.
Thank you, guys.